Hello and welcome to the end of Lyre. Yep, that's right. You heard that correct. This is the last chapter for Lyre. We're gonna see the finale. Yeah. So, if you recall last, Richter was about to be executed by being fired upon by arrows, because I guess Adrius thought that was funny. But supposedly it was a ploy in order to lure out Lyall by basically putting, Richter out there, where Lyall could just rush in and, save him. But I kind of feel that that might be, like him saying like, oh yeah, I was planning this all along. But yeah. Thankfully, Lyall got there in time and saved Richter, and they're off into the sunset. However, it seems that Adrius's, I guess, plans. Well, he had plans for this, so he's setting free the Heart's Cavalry or something like that. I think that's what it's called. So we're about to. Well, I'm assuming we're about to see if that's what's going to happen, because even though I'm a Patreon, I decided to just wait until the public goes out so that I can be reading this as fresh as you guys would be, So yeah. Anywho, so I guess without further ado, let us finish off Lyre. Hopefully I can do this all in one video. Chapter 13, Day 50. Lyall. Lyall's padded feet clamber about the floor of the tunnel as he runs his paws along the rough walls. Each step he takes makes his legs feel like they're twisting into a knot. The long cloak draped around his body drags on the damp floor, the hem soaked in cold mud. The long dark cape underneath also becomes lined with the damp stain as it's pulled across the wet surface. Hiding all over the castle and town has been a struggle on his body, having not eaten in days and barely getting any sleep. Still, his face is determined and his stature looks as strong as ever. The armor underneath his shroud isn't as heavy as the ornamental set that he wears when he is stationed about the castle, which helps him getting around the cramped tunnel. With every stride, his pace becomes faster, almost like when one would be excited for something around the corner of a long hall. As they round it, they feel like they forgot how to walk. But instead of being excited, Lyall is filled with anxiety and fear. He overheard the guards. He knows what's going to happen. The cruelty of it all. Lyall had only ever read about events like this in books, but to think Adrius would reenact such a thing. In the dark, he can see the door at the end of the tunnel approaching him. Barely visible cracks of light shine from around the door, and Lyall rushes to it in a desperate manner. Timing what he has planned is risky and almost impossible, but it's better to be too early than too late. And yet, he stops as he reaches the door, one paw resting on the handle, keys in the other. What he's about to do is very dangerous, but thinking about what would happen if he doesn't even try forces him to shove the key into the hole and pull upon the handle. At first, it doesn't budge, but sends a slight wave of terror through his body. But after pulling harder, he throws the door open and steps through into the western gate hall, close to the kitchens. As his bare feet touch the cold stone floor, and the door closes with a thud that echoes up the corridor, Lyall prepares himself for what is about to happen. He breaks into a fast walk down the hall, heading straight ahead. As he passes a few junctions, he notices a few people walking by out of the corner of his eye, but they don't pay him any mind. His face is covered by the hood of his cloak, with a thick scarf wrapped around his muzzle. To anyone else, he'd look like he just came from outdoors, less suspicious and more like he was just dressed for the weather. It also helps that he's not the only male above average height wandering the castle. When he's around Liz, Adrius, or Leif, he certainly stands out, but he blends in everywhere else. The hall bends and turns into a storage room as he stands over a wooden balcony, stairs to his right leading down to the main floor. Barrels of supplies and tools are strewn about, with chairs and boxes stacked against the walls. He's tempted for a moment to take some of the tools, but everything in the bag slung on his back should help for now. It's better to travel light. There is a few servants who appear to be milling about, but Lyall pays them no mind. He quickly descends the stairs that break beneath his feet, making his way to the ground below. Some of the servants look at him, but don't raise concern. He moves past them to the end of the room, which leads to a small hallway. He's taken this route many times, but it's usually more crowded and lively. Once he reaches the end of the hall, he emerges into a room just outside the courtyard, where the stables are. There's saddles and water buckets placed around the room, and it's a lot more clean than he remembers. Lyall's heart sinks, and before it can hit the bottom of his stomach, the guard assisting the headsman spots him. It's the lynx that was in Ritcher's cell when he came down into the dungeons to get him. They're standing on the other side of the room, the headsman carrying a saddle. The door to the courtyard is off to his left, but Lyall already has been seen. There's a look of shock and confusion on his face for a moment, but it quickly turns into a look of fear. The captain. Lyall brings his voice to a sharp whisper. Listen to me. You have to let me pass. The headsman stands over in the corner, still holding the saddle, a confused twist to his mouth. Lyall looks back to the guard, his paw grasping the grip of his sword. I don't mean to. Before Lyall can finish his sentence, the guard rushes forward, but instead of going for Lyall, he runs for the door. His paw is placed firmly on the grip of his blade. It's the captain! No! Lyall draws his sword, the Verkrite blade ringing as it slides out of the scabbard. Before he even knows what he's going to do, he's already doing it, and with full intent. It happens in an instant, but to Lyall, it's as if time slowed down. As the lynx makes a break for the door, Lyall jumps to the side, bringing his sword back and swinging it into the nape of his neck. It cleaves into the back of the lynx's head just underneath their skull and cuts deep, thick red blood squirting out from the open flesh. The wound is so deep that Lyall almost cleaved the lynx's entire head off from behind with a single swipe. The guard immediately crumbles to the ground, his plate armor clattering as it hits the floor. Part of his body slams into the wall, carried by the momentum of running to the door. He makes no noise, just laying there silently as the blood gushes from the back of his neck. It pools onto the ground as Lyall's feet, and as the puddle reaches his toes, he staggers back, breathing heavily as the adrenaline wears off. He just took a life. For the first time in all his years of living, he finally had to kill someone. Or did he have to? No, there wasn't any other way. He wants to cry or shout, but he can't do any of that. If he were to stop and think too hard about any of this, it could mean life or death for both him and Ritcher. He thought that he was prepared to take a life in order to make his plan work, but he wasn't. Nothing prepares you for that. Training to be a soldier, a squire, a knight. How could anyone ever be prepared for something like this? Lyall wants to retch onto the floor, but his stomach is so empty that he feels like nothing could come out. Lyall looks up at the headsman, expecting him to run or even attempt to cut him down. The headsman just stands there, staring at Lyall with a concerned face. Nothing pitiful, but it's definitely not the face of a man pleased with what's happened. Lyall swallows, his mouth dry as he addresses the headsman. Do you mean to stand in my way as well? His heart is banging away against his chest as he can feel his plans crumbling to pieces. The headsman stares back at him, those golden eyes shining like the moon as he stands there silently. A small smile graces his face as he grips the handle of his great axe, holding it out to Lyall's direction. I am a tool for the Justicari. He pauses, taking a step back. But above all, I am a servant of Tigrin. I will not stand in your way, Lyall Reed. Ritcher. It's impossible trying to separate my dreams from reality. Even harder to separate my dreams from visions. Visions of past lives and other lived experiences. They all swirled into the center of my thoughts like water flowing down a drain. Like the mind's eye. I've been falling in and out of consciousness for what feels like months. Years? I hope not. I hope that I'll wake up any moment now and everything will be fine. Lyall will be lying next to me in a warm bed, his pretty eyes closed as he softly snores. His large set eloquent paw holding mine in a loose grasp. Once the dream ends, this is all that I wish to wake up to. It could be anywhere at any time, as long as it's with him at my side. The one person left in this world that I truly feel that I can trust. All I can do is wait. I can't even remember much of what's happened. It's like nothing's happened. Did it ever happen? Through each of the visions, all of the dreams, I'm enveloped by the world around me. I lay on a bed of fur, my limbs aching, a stinging pain flowing over my back like river rapids. A cold breeze is tugged over my skin like a blanket, twisting and tugging around me. My mouth feels dry and the icy wind kisses my lips. I can't really hear anything over the scream of silence in my mind. Everything smells warm, like the dry heat of a fireplace mixed with the smells of burning wood. I can also smell crisp grass and trees. Is this my mind playing tricks on me? Filling my closed eyes with dreams and apparitions, but also triggering my other four senses. It's not as overwhelming as the visions, though. They pass by in an uncontrollably fast manner. If I try to slow them down and focus, it becomes harder to think. It's not just that, though. It's like I become lost in them. The visions take hold and I feel frozen in place, only able to watch, but unable to comprehend. Like some sort of inanimate object. It feels like hell has grabbed me by the arms, holding me in place. I'm scared to give in. But as each moment passes, I wonder if that's my only way out. Letting the mind's eye take full control. After holding out for so long, maybe that's all I can do. Raynor flinches as lightning strikes over the horizon, fighting against the fireplace and candles to light up the room. He stands in the corner looking out the window as his heart bangs against his chest. Chewing on the hard tips of his fingers, he bounces his leg, his eyes darting away from the window as he hears Elena let out another cry. As she lays there breathing heavily, all he can do is stand there, unable to help. Her midwife, Ginny, stands by her side, calmly speaking to her while holding her hand. Handmaidens run from the bed to the door, assisting in any way that they can while making sure everything goes as planned. The doctors had to be called, which is never a good sign. It wasn't a good sign last time. Dr. Oscar and his assistant Leif stand by the bed. They're very focused on their work, trying to be quick and careful. Deep breaths, my queen. Deep breaths. Ginny demonstrates for Lena, breathing in slowly and then exhaling in a steady way. Lena attempts to follow her pace. My queen, you have to push. I understand that there is pain, but you can do it. She lets out another scream which circles around the room like a terrible wind. The longer this goes on, the harder it is for Raynor to stay calm. This is their third attempt at having a child. He hoped for her sake that this time would be different. Lena wanted to give him an heir so bad, but each time they go through this, it kills a part of him. He can only imagine what it does to her. He observes as Leif runs to her side, a small bowl of medicine to help with the pain being tipped into her mouth. As Raynor watches her struggle and shout, rain pounding against the window, one thought rings out through his mind above all the other. This will be the last time. No more attempts after this. The idea of putting her through this pain over and over again always ties his stomach into knots. Her moans of pain grow quiet as the contractions pause, and as they do, the rain grows louder. Raynor can feel chills over his whole body, and he notices the numbness growing around his limbs. Ray. Get Ray. His eyes look in her direction, but he's staring off into space, lost in the thoughts of everything that can go wrong. My king, she wishes to speak with you. Raynor snaps out of his trance, looking down at Ginny as she stands off to the side. He rushes over to Elena and brushes his hand on her cheek, kneeling down at her side and grasping her hands in his. It's okay, Lena. I'm here. I'll be here through all of it. He makes sure to keep eye contact as she stares up at him, her eyes tired with flickering eyelids. I know you will. I'm trying, Ray. I really am. He rubs the palm of his hands against hers while shushing her softly. I know you are. Do not push yourself too hard, my love. Leif, I need you to get over here. Yes, of course. Leif rushes over to Oscar's side, helping with something behind the linen draped over Elena's legs. Raynor continues looking at her, making sure that she knows that he's there. I will give you the air that you need, Ray. I promise you this. Even if it... None of that. Everything is going to be fine, Lena. You're doing great. Steady your breathing now. She lets out a sharp yelp, then proceeds to groan in pain, the noise growing louder as it goes on. Raynor holds her hand tightly, brushing her cheek, trying to get her to follow his breathing as Jeannie was before. Her face twists into a painful expression which rips his heart in half. He takes a moment to look up and sees Jeannie on the other side of the bed, holding her other hand. Oscar and Leif stand at the end of the bed, leaning down. Oscar, what's happening? I can see them. The child has breached. Elena lets out another howl of pain and Raynor catches himself squeezing her hand tightly. He loosens his grip, but as he does, she clasps her hand around his tightly, squeezing even harder than he was. Deep breaths, my queen. The babe is almost through. Raynor wants to hug her, pull her into a tight embrace, and tell her everything is going to be okay. He wishes to take all of the pain away from her and divert it onto himself. But all he can do is sit there and hold her hand, repeating the only phrases that he can think of that would help. Deep breaths. Everything is going to be okay. You're doing fine. Jeannie, come here quickly. It's happening. She lets out another scream, a scream that seems to last for hours. Then, she falls back into the bed, her body sinking into it, exhaling and closing her eyes. They're here. A wave of relief flows over Raynor upon hearing the words. As Oscar and Leif take care of the child, removing them from Elena, Raynor holds her hand, tears falling from his eyes onto the clean linens which she lays upon. Handmaidens run about, carrying bowls and cloth, making sure that Oscar and Leif have everything that they need for the process. Elena slowly opens her eyes, giving Raynor a weak smile. Before he can become lost in it, the noise around him drowns out his other senses. Raynor looks up, watching as Leif works with Oscar, Jeannie standing over them and assisting in any way that she can. The two handmaidens run out of the room in a rush, others staying behind, attempting to attend to Lena. Through all of the commotion and the pounding rain on the window, Raynor can't help but notice one thing. Not a single cry can be heard from the baby. What's wrong? Your Majesty, Dear, what's the matter? Elena looks at him with an anxious gaze, her eyes now wide open. The baby is not breathing properly. Before Oscar can continue to explain, Elena lets out a moan. No. This can't happen. Ray! Ray, you have to do something! Just then, Jeannie and Leif rush to her side, Jeannie holding her arm. My queen, please, you need to calm down. The good doctor knows what he is doing. Everything is going to be fine. Elena doesn't give in for a moment and begins to yell. No! Let me see them! Let me hold my child, please! Raynar notices Leif has his winged hand placed on Elena's shoulder, but instead of looking at her, he looks at Oscar, standing on the other side of the room. He has the fawn placed on a clean blanket in a small cart. He's examining the child, carefully placing his hand upon their small chest and feeling around. The child lays there, motionless. Not a sound can be heard from them. No, 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 no. Why is my child not crying? Raynar feels like the world has come to a stop. There, his child sits, laying on a table with little hands clasped at their sides. His wife writhes in anguish upon the bed. Their bed. This is their bed, their room, their home, their den. The place where they would bring their child into this world. Every noise around him sounds distant and far away. His wife grips his hand tightly as his arm sits limply at his side. Just then, through all of the noise and chaos, a small voice rises above it all. I know what to do. Elena turns her head to the bird's direction, his gaze still trained on the child. Leif, please attend to the queen. I know what to do. Doctor, please, let me help. This is a very rare case, but I've seen this before. Leif, there is nothing to me. The child is not breathing. Just then, Elena shouts across the room. Let him help. Oscar! You let him save my child, or I swear upon Tigran that I will make sure that you feel double the pain that I felt on this day. Yes, my queen. Leif rushes to Oscar's side, and Oscar steps back as Leif gently picks up the child in his hands. Ray. Raynar's attention is turned back to his wife, her face serious yet full of concern. Stay with me. I need you. Of course, Lena. Of course. He leans down and kisses her on the forehead, running his hand up and down her arm. Are they a prince? Her voice changes to a soft tone as she weakly asks this question. Raynar looks up at Leif, who is doing delicate compressions on the child's chest, rubbing up and down softly. Our child. Are they a boy or a girl? Leif doesn't break away from their work for a moment as they answer. You have a beautiful little prince, my queen. Raynar looks back down at Elena, but she just stares at the ceiling, swallowing as her body trembles. A boy, Lena. We've had a son. She doesn't reply, just continuing to stare at the ceiling, blinking away tears that roll over the fur of her face and onto the pillow beneath her head. We've had a little boy. Raynar can feel his own tears begin to spill from his eyes. His voice shakes as he tries to get the words out. The happiest moment of his life hangs in front of him on a string, taunting him. Hanging by a thread. Ready to be ripped away at any moment. But as the dark thoughts begin to close in on him like a cloud of smoke, a noise blows it all away. Ginny and Oscar rush to Leif's side as the boy breaks out into a fit of crying. It sounds like a squealing pig, but to Raynar, it's the most wonderful thing that he's ever heard. The sound of his son coming back to life. He stands up and looks in the direction of the noise and sees Leif holding the baby in his arms, rocking him slightly before passing him to the doctor. You've done it! Oh, praise God! Ginny begins to help Oscar wrap the baby in a clean, minty green blanket. Leif rests his wings, hands onto the edge of the cart, staring at the floor as he breathes heavily. Raynar wants to run over and lift Leif up, pulling him into a tight embrace, but he looks down at his wife first. He's never seen her look more relieved. It's as if every worry in the world has left her thoughts, replaced with the sound of her crying child. Ginny quickly brings the boy over to Elena and passes him to her. You don't need to check on him? We can check on him later, but I've never seen a healthier child. For now, you may hold him. Elena takes the boy in her arms and cradles him, tears of joy staining the fur on her cheeks. Oh my God, Ray, look at him. He's perfect. He has your nose, Ray, look. Raynar lets out a laugh, which comes out more like a gasp, the taste of his tears invading his mouth as they flow down to the corners of his muzzle. The boy rests in his arms, his little brown eyes open ever so slightly as his nose twitches. He cries and cries, throwing his little arms about with tiny, clasping hands. His little hooved feet kick the inside of his blanket sporadically. Yes, I see it. He has your beautiful eyes. She lets out a laugh and cradles her hand beneath his head. Raynar leans down and kisses her on the head a few times, drunk with relief. He then turns to Leif, who is now standing behind him, near the end of the bed. You and Oscar helped assist my wife when she was in pain. But most of all, you saved my son. I can never fully repay you for what you've done tonight. Leif fiddles with his wings, looking down at the ground after being praised so highly. I was just doing my job, Your Majesty. There is no need to thank... Raynar kneels down and pulls the small bird into a tight hug, taking care not to crush him. When he pulls away, the bird is a little dazed, but clasps his wings together, giving a large smile. Ray. Raynar turns around to look at Elena, who's still cradling their son in her arms. You have to name him. Give our son his name. Raynar stands and walks back over to Elena. Her smile soft, but her eyes are happier than he's ever seen them. Just then, the sound of thunder rattles against the window along with the rain pounding against it. The shadows of the water droplets sliding down the window scatter across the floor and canopy of the bed, creating a mesmerizing effect. Raynar looks down at his son, his chubby little arms flailing at his sides as he wails. He's small, even for a baby, but Raynar sees great strength hidden inside of his tiny body. The strength of a king. Raynar smiles and reaches down, the boy grabbing his finger with his tiny hand. You fought hard to come into this world, little one. You have your mother's strength. The boy stops crying for just a moment, but still wiggles about in his mother's arms. Child of the storm, your name will be... Adrius. Elena smiles, brushing her hand gently over one of Adrius's small ears. A worthy name for a worthy king. Sitting by the pond, Lyall tosses a small rock into the water, watching as the ripples make their way up to the edge, distorting his reflection. He's lost in thought, tail aimlessly brushing over the blades of grass beneath it. My mother said not to throw rocks in the pond. Lyall looks up at Adrius, the small deer hanging by his hands from a tree limb, just a short distance off the ground. Adrius had asked Lyall to come outside with him since his parents were meeting with Sir Runar. Sorry. Lyall says this in a way that it almost sounds like a question. She said that you might hit a fish on the head. I told her the fish swam away too fast to get hit, but she said just not to do it. Adrius falls from the tree limb, landing on his hooves with a bit of a wobble. I think that she just doesn't want all the rocks ending up in the pond. Makes sense to me. Adrius turns around to look back up at the tree, and Lyall notices that the back of his shirt is covered in leaves. Here, you've got leaves all over your back. He gets up and bends down, brushing the leaves off of the soft fabric. You sure love climbing trees, don't you? Yeah, but doesn't every kid my age? Not as much as you. I suppose. Adrius looks back up at the top of the tree, the sunlight shining down through the opening, casting spotted shadows on the two of them. Birds chirp in the deep parts of the branches, the noise ringing through the leaves and bouncing off of the water below. When I'm up there, I can see everything. Not just what's over the wall, but everything beyond the village, too. You should try it. Lyall laughs and shrugs. I've tried climbing before. Heights never agreed with me. Well then, I guess you won't be getting one of these then. Adrius holds out his hand, showing off two ripe dragon apricots, which he had knocked onto the ground from the tree. Lyall goes to reach for one quickly, but Adrius pulls them away. Come and get them! Adrius tries to break off into a sprint, almost tripping over himself. Before he can get far, Lyall's already standing into a lunge, snatching an apricot from Adrius's hand. Hey! You said for me to get it. Lyall says this while gesticulating with his hand in Adrius's direction, plucking the torn stem off the fruit. Adrius sighs and sits down in front of the pond. Next time, I'm not gonna get you one if you're not gonna play. That's okay. Soon I'll be tall enough to reach them from the ground. Lyall steps back near the tree, leaning against it while taking a sloppy bite out of his fruit. The juice bursts from the opening in the skin, coating his lips in the orange liquid. Just how tall are you gonna get? Lyall thinks for a moment before answering, drumming his fingers on the skin of the fruit. 210? Wow. That's how tall my father is. I'll probably be around his height. Adrius leans back on the grass, looking up at the sky. One day, I'll be as tall as my father. I'm sure you will. You're already well on your way to looking like him. Adrius tilts his body to look at Lyall, who gestures with his hands to the top of his own head, between his ears. Oh, yeah. Adrius touches the tip of his small horns, rubbing them carefully. Mother says that they actually came in very early. Nobody expected them for another year or two. Lyall smiles, watching as Adrius neatly brushes the fur around his horns, down with his hands. He remembers how he felt the exact same way when his mane started to come in. By the time your parents and I are back, I wager that they'll be twice as tall. Lyall expects another excited bout of boasting from Adrius, but instead is met with silence. Then he watches as a small deer's face twists into a frown, his lower lip quivering. Hey, wait, I'm sorry. What's wrong? Is it something that I said? Adrius exhales through his nose and sits up, looking behind him where Lyall stands. No, you didn't do anything. I'm scared of Mother and Father going to Dries. He scoots his legs closer to himself, hugging them as he does. Don't even worry about it, Adrius. They won't be gone long. It's a little bit scary, I know, but you'll be fine. I know that I'll be fine. But what if they aren't? Lyall's hands drop down to his side, the fruit still cradled in his palm. What do you mean? Adrius takes a deep breath and starts talking in a fast manner. So 2 weeks ago, Mother took me to Aunt Charlotte's to play with John. We had lots of cake then, it was all really, really good. Anyway, Aunt Charlotte was talking with Mother about some other things. At some point, Mother sent us away. We hid and listened, though. Adrius. I know. Just listen. Aunt Charlotte was telling me about how she heard from your friend Aiden's father that he was almost attacked on the road to Dries. What? Lyall drops his fruit on the ground, but doesn't get the chance to mourn the loss of his treat. Is he okay? I said that he was almost attacked. By what? Robbers. They tried to catch him in the canyon south of Holmes End, but he managed to escape them. That's the Northern Run. That's the road that you'll be taking. Nobody's going to steal from us. I'm not an idiot, Lyall. They'll do more than just steal. Lyall can tell how afraid Adrius is from his voice alone, the way it shakes with each word. Adrius. A couple of bandits aren't going to be a threat to us at all. They wouldn't dare attack the king's own entourage. Hundreds of armed men will be guarding your parents, but if you ask me, a good 10 would do. Lyall leans back against the tree, lightly scratching his claws into the bark. Fear is a self-fulfilling prophecy, Adrius. You shouldn't have to worry about a thing like that. But the way Charlotte described it, I wish that I could come too. Lyall scuffs the heels of his feet against the grass, looking up at the branches of the tree. So do I. But that's not my place. The air grows silent, and before Lyall can let things get too quiet for a little deer, he tries to assure him. Lord Byron wants to use this as a learning opportunity for me. I'll make sure that your parents' carriage doesn't so much as hit a bump in the road. You mean it? Adrius whips around, hands placed firmly on the grass beneath where he sits. Of course. You promise? Lyall walks over to him and sits down, resting his paw on the small of the deer's back. I promise. Adrius leans into him, his head resting against Lyall's side. That makes me feel better. You're a prodigy when it comes to using a sword. I watch you duel in the courtyard all the time from my chamber window. All the time? Mm-hmm. Adrius nods his head, poking one of his horns into the side of Lyall's arm. Lyall gulps, thinking back to the time that he snuck Eden into the courtyard with him to teach him the different forms that he'd learned. One would hope Adrius didn't see that. Okay, well... He coughs into his fist, leaning back a bit. I'm certain that everything is going to go as smooth as butter. Thank you. They sit there for a moment and Adrius already decides to jump to another topic. Do you want to go to Auntie Charlotte's with me later? She promised me lemon cakes last time that I saw her. Lyall shifts in his seated position after hearing this. Lemon cakes sound great right now, but he already has a prior engagement. Sorry, little guy, but I'm gonna see Eden later. Maybe next time. Lyall stands up from the ground, wiping the grass and the dirt from the seat of his trousers. Adrius shifts in his rested position and turns towards the entrance to the garden. Mother! Adrius gets to his knee and rises from the ground, wiping the grass and the dirt from his legs. Lyall turns around and sees Queen Elena, followed by a few handmaidens. She turns and stops them at the entrance, letting them know with a simple hand gesture that she does not need to be followed. Hello, sweetie. I see you're having fun. Yep. The little deer gallops up to her, and she takes him in her arms, patting his head with her hand. She looks at Lyall, who gives a small bow in her direction while grinning. She smiles back at him with that smile so warm that it could melt ice. Hello, Lyall. I'm glad that I was able to find you out here. I figured that I would wait until I knew that you weren't out here before sending a servant to fetch you. Lyall scratches the back of his ear shyly and gives a sheepish grin. Is there anything that I can help? I got this for you. Adrius holds up the fruit in her hand, reaching as high as he can. Lyall had wondered why Adrius wasn't eating it. Elena smiles down at him and takes the fruit. Perfectly ripe. You're so thoughtful. Thank you, sweetie. She leans down, kissing the top of his head. Adrius, why don't you go and play by the berry bushes for a while? I need to speak with Lyall for a moment. Adrius takes a moment to respond, but eventually agrees. Sure. He runs off towards the bushes and sits down in front of them, probably looking for bugs. Lyall shakes his attention away from the boy and turns back to Elena, who looks as if she's excited to tell him something. Raynar and I spoke with Sir Runar about certain things that need to be looked after while we're gone. However, we also brought up Lord Baron's proposal with Sir Runar. You did? Yes, and I'm happy to tell you that he thinks that it's a great idea. Lyall claps his hands together firmly, almost jumping for joy. So, when I get there? For a few days you should be getting special training from the leader of Dryers' Palace Guard, Captain Drazen. Oh god, this is like a dream come true. He's the greatest spearman in all of Dryers. They say that he can throw a spear over 30 meters and still never miss his target. I wonder if I can beat him in a duel. Lyall places his paw over his muzzle, shutting himself up. Elena simply laughs, shaking her head while tossing the fruit Adrius gave her between her hands. She doesn't seem to mind Lyall gushing about his hero. Yes, he certainly has a reputation. But you'll do well to remember that you won't just be playing with swords the whole time. He's going to teach you other things. I know that you hope to be a knight one day, so you'll benefit from paying attention to his lessons. Lyall places his palm behind his back and looks down sheepishly. I know. I understand. He looks back up at her, practically beaming. Thank you so much. Lyall steps forward and gives Elena a hug. She's surprised for a moment, but then easily returns the embrace, patting him on the back softly. You're welcome, Lyall, but you should go and thank Sir Runer as soon as you can. Lyall pulls away from the hug and can barely contain his excitement. He assumed the entire trip would just be to follow Lord Biren around wherever he went, helping him the whole time. But to be able to meet and train under Drazen Nova, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I believe that he actually wanted to speak with you as soon as possible. I suggest that you go find him. Right. Lyall quickly bows to Elena before running up the path, but he stops running and turns to Adrius. Bye, Adrius. Adrius has a blue butterfly on top of his wrist and looks up, waving at Lyall. Goodbye. As Lyall walks through the archway leading back into the castle, he turns around and sees Elena sitting with an excited Adrius as a butterfly lands on his nose. Elena jumps in her sleep after hearing a knock at the door. Raynar, sleeping like a rock, doesn't move one bit. She slides out of bed, her night robe flowing behind her as she walks to the door. Mother? When she hears the voice of her son, she pulls the handle and opens the door for him. Sweetie, what's wrong? Can you not sleep? He stands in the doorway, his little ears turned back. I had a really bad dream. The boy looks ready to burst into tears, but seems to be holding them back pretty well. Did you not tell the maid? I told her I wanted to see you. How did you sneak past the guards? There's no sneaking around, Sir Bjorn. They let me up here. She turns around to look at Raynar, who still hides under the covers, his antlers and ears poking out from the top of the blanket. He continues to sleep, snoring softly, like he always does. Okay, come on in, but we have to be very quiet. Your father is sleeping and needs his rest for when we leave tomorrow. Okay. He whispers this, giving a tiny smile before quietly walking into the room. After closing the door, she takes his hand and leads him to the sofa by the east window. Now, what was your dream about? She sits down on the sofa and Adrius hops onto her lap, resting his head against hers. It was a normal dream at first. A lot of weird things were happening. None of it made any sense. There was one part that scared me a lot, though. I was outside playing in the garden. The grass in the garden was all yellow, though. Dead grass? No. Yellow as if it was made of gold. All of the plants were like that, too. There was this anthill. It was in between two bricks on the path. I almost stepped on it too, but I stopped myself. Then I saw me. What do you mean? It was just me. Adrius holds her hand tighter, and Elena places her chin upon the top of his head. He walked up to where the anthill was, holding a wooden pail, smiling at me in a creepy way. Inside of the bucket was fire, and he poured it into the anthill. The fire moved like water as it poured down the top entrance. When he did this, the ants crawled up my legs, biting me all over. I was so scared, but then he tossed the fire onto my legs. It didn't burn at all, but all the ants died. Then he held out his hand to help me up. The entire time, all I could hear was loud drums and yelling. Elena rubs his back with her hand, rocking him slightly as he leans into her. When I took his hand, I woke up. Adrius. It was just a bad dream. Nothing to be afraid of. I know, but it still scared me. I don't want you to go to Dry's. After hearing this, Elena hugs him tightly. Oh, sweetie. Why can't I come with you? He says this with a face pressed into her body, his voice muffled by the robe. Adrius, it's as we said before. You must stay because an Ossian must always look after the throne. She pulls him away and rests her hands on his shoulder. Aren't you excited about that? I don't know. You'll be looking after the entire kingdom. You can sit on the throne and take care of everything. Sounds hard. Oh, believe me, it is. Your grandfather will be helping you, though. That will make things much easier. She pokes his nose while saying this, making him giggle softly. You're going to be a wonderful king one day. This will be a fun test for you. Like a learning experience? Exactly. They sit there for a moment, longer before Adrius breaks the silence, wiping his eyes. Can you see me like you used to? Elena looks over at Raynar, who still lies still on the bed. His soft snores a quiet ambience for their conversation. Quietly? All right. But then you're going right back to bed, little prince. He eagerly nods and then rests on her. Elena intones a small tune to test her vocals before humming a song. Adrius bounds down the corridor, his small hoofs clopping against the smooth stone flooring. The prince skids to a stop at one of the windows and brings himself up with his arms to look over the balustrade. There, just above the horizon, he can see carts, wagons, and carriages slowly rolling over the hills of the northern run. He drops down from his lifted position and continues to bolt down the hallway, almost running into a servant carrying a box. Sorry. He twists around while running to apologize, the servant shaking their head in bemusement. As he runs, he keeps his focus on the carriage, watching as they draw closer. The beams and pillars on the balcony pass by in a blur as he continues his sprint. Then he stops. If it wasn't for his youthful agility, he would have surely fell over, coming to a stop so suddenly. His eyes stay focused on the caravan as he walks up to the balustrade once more. This time he stands on the base, planting his hooves on the small slab of stone near the bottom. There's not so many wagons now. Some of them were carrying goods that needed to be traded, so of course this was inevitable. Still, Adrius knew those wagons should have come back, empty or not. Surely there should be more in the entourage. He knows that there should be more. Then he notices the soldiers. It's hard to distinguish them from the squires and stable boys as both trudge along the carts. Some of them look dreadfully tired while others ride the carts, their heads down. Adrius can even see what looks to be injured men. Some laying on the floors of the wagons, others being helped along by their fellow men, arms around each other's shoulders. Adrius starts to feel a lump forming in his throat, but the fear instead settles in his stomach. It churns and twists inside of him as his eyes dance over each cluster of men. Some of the carts they're being carried in looked new, not made from the same wood as the ones from around Lyre. Jenny rounds the corner, slowly walking down the hall. Adrius bites his cheek when he sees the last wagon roll over the hillside, not followed by any others. Doing another scan, Adrius realizes that among all of these things, one thing stands out to him the most. Come along, my prince. Your mother and father have returned. Yes, it's a question he wanted an answer to the moment that he first looked out the window. A question that he's been asking himself since he first laid eyes upon the entourage. Where is the royal carriage? Adrius drops from the support, landing on his hands and knees. My prince? He ignores her, rising in a sprint, almost tripping over himself. His breath is fast and his legs are unsteady as he darts down the corridor. All Jenny would be able to hear is the fast clopping of hooves against the smooth stone flooring. Raynar stands outside of the door to Adrius's chambers. His gloved hand rests limply on the antler-shaped handle of the door. Adrius, please. You haven't left your room in days. He speaks through the crack in the center of the door, his muzzle almost pressed against it. There is no response from the inside. The servants tell me that you haven't been eating. Your mother wouldn't want this. Still no response. So, you're going to do nothing? Adrius stands in the doorway to his father's room, the king's expression turning into a frown. That is not what I said. And yet, it's what will happen anyway. Adrius barges past him into the room, his father stepping back and letting him in, closing the door behind him with a thud. Oh, of course. You know, I'd really rather you question me in front of the entire court than whatever this is. This is a private conversation where more can be said than what's spoken in front of the court. Or do you not like that? Raynar's nose twitches and he walks over to the wine by the cupboard. What are your issues? Ask Leif. I'm sure that he tells you everything. Raynar's shoulders slump and he lets out a sigh. He finishes pouring 2 cups of red wine and turns to bring one to Adrius. Not those issues. Adrius, now sitting on the end of the bed, takes the cup and rests it in his lap, holding it with both hands. My issue lies with the fact that you refuse to take any action. Here we are in a time of peace, but it's not like that everywhere. You think that I don't know this? Adrius, I am doing everything in my power to solve the problems to our south. Dries has an absolute control over the territory where the heart of the problem is. Until they can take action, my hands are tied. Adrius gestures with his hands towards the south. Laws be damned! The problem is bleeding into our lands and causing the suffering of our people. With each day that passes, they grow stronger. That barren wasteland keeps spilling them out onto our lands, and you want to sit there and say we're powerless? Raynar lets out a sigh and pinches the bridge of his nose. We need to fight back against this problem, with or without Dries' permission. I know that the small steps that I take in order to solve these problems go unappreciated, but it's the only route that we can take. So you know the reasons why then? Adrius. Dries has no concern for the problems in the canyons. It doesn't affect their citizens nearly as much as ours. King Aaron sits on his throne daily and does nothing to help. And yet, we are forbidden from causing conflict beyond our own borders. King Aaron doesn't care. Raynar looks as if he's going to start lecturing Adrius, but he holds back. They sit there in silence for a moment, but Adrius doesn't let the silence hang in the air for long. Do you remember Mother's funeral? Raynar breathes in deeply and exhales, closing his eyes. Like it was yesterday. I remember everything all too vividly. It was about a week after her murder. All of the lords and ladies from all over Lyre traveled day and night to pay their respects and mourn. After that was the private burial. She wanted to be buried on the hill just outside of our garden, so that's what we did. What is the point of all of this? Every noble from Bryden's Vale to Grimbrock came to pay their respects to your wife. My mother. And yet, not a single word was heard from King Aaron. He doesn't care. Mother's blood was spilt on his sands, and we haven't heard from your supposed friend since. Enough. You gave this issue so little attention that it's safe to assume that you don't care either. It's like you're giving up. Quiet! You mourned her, but now you don't even like talking about her. You're going to keep bottling this up, then eventually spill it on someone. You don't even speak of her around me, your son. You just hide in your castle while people meet the same fate as her. Adrius' chest rises with each breath as he's now standing from his seat, wineglass slammed on the end table. Raynar just stands there silently. His face has traces of anger, which slowly fade away, almost going unnoticed by Adrius. Well? Still no response from Raynar, his head lowered. Adrius makes his way to the door and goes to turn the knob, angry tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Why did you kill me? Adrius stops turning the knob, a chill running up his spine, bristling the fur on the back of his neck. He turns around to stare at his father, eyes wide open with a confused expression plastered on his face. What? It was here, in this very room. You killed your own father. Father, what are you talking about? Is this some sort of cruel joke? Raynar doesn't answer, which causes Adrius to become even more confused. You've lost Lyall as well. This statement hits Adrius a little harder. I didn't lose him. You've paved the road ahead. You'll never be able to go back. Tears now stream down Adrius's face as Raynar stands there, like a statue, spouting off these cryptic messages. Adrius, I loved you more than life itself. You don't even know what you're running from anymore. Yeah. Adrius. Adrius lunges forward in his bed, the deer chest heaving as he chokes on his first deep breath. What? My father. What was I? Sitting up in bed, he pulls the sheets closer to him, gripping them in his fist. The nightmares he'd had just fade away as suddenly as they came, like water evaporating on a hot summer day. His father was angry with him? No, disappointed. Arguing. Adrius sits there for a moment, his mind desperately grasping the air for the dream, but to no avail. Adrius tosses the covers over his body, the cold morning air rushes over his fur. Looking outside the window, he realizes that it's closer to noon than morning. He must have slept in. He brings his hand to his bare chest, sliding his fingers across it until he finds a necklace hung around his neck. Rubbing the soft part of his fingers over the piece of gold, he can feel the shape of the antlers on its base. It was his mother's. After this, he brings his hands up to his head, firmly rubbing the area where his antler is missing. A small bit of bone still lingers, but it hasn't had enough time to heal properly in order to start growing once more. He then rubs his muzzle, the scar still feeling fresh, but has healed for the most part. It's nice to not need the bandages anymore, as they were becoming a pain for him. Not only that, but as much as he wished that he had both antlers, it's nice to have one less sharp pointy object to accidentally ram through the headboard of the bed. Adrius turns to look at the bed that he's sitting in. His father's bed. The king's chambers. The entire room has been given to him upon ascending the throne. Of course, only after they've managed to fix the place up. Adrius's own room, however, is still being renovated. So this is the only place that he can sleep for the time being. It's only natural that he does sleep here. He's the king after all. His own room is merely a personal choice. Throwing his legs over the right side of the bed, his hooved feet touch the floor below and rest for a moment. A sharp head pain overcomes him and he arches his back, leaning his head down between his legs. He takes a sharp breath in through his teeth while clenching them. As he's recovering, there is a knock at the door. Leif? It is, my king. Adrius looks down at himself, seeing that he's only in his undergarments. It's only Leif, so no need to look presentable. Come in. Adrius hears the jingle of keys and then the sound of the door unlocking, a loud thud as the mechanisms fall into place. Leif pushes the door open and shuffles into the room. He then braces the other side and pushes it close. Good morning, your majesty. I take it that there was no need to wear the bandages? Adrius shuffles back onto the bed, covering his waist with part of the blanket. I assume so, considering that I didn't bleed all over the linens.
That's very good to hear. Will you allow me to examine the,
He points at the top of Adrius's head. Of course. Adrius leans his head down for the bird to take a closer look. Leif takes a close look at the area where the antler was broken off, brushing aside the fur around the wound. He then gently pokes a small bit left behind.
Any pain?
A little bit.
How about if I do this?
Leif presses down firmly on the top, which causes a small shock of pain which then spreads around the area. Ow! Yes! Adrius pulls away from the bird, slightly lifting his arms in defense.
My apologies. I just have one last thing that I need to check.
Then go ahead and get it over with. Adrius lowers his head one more time, and Leif touches a small bit of horn one last time. This time he gently pushes and tugs on the sides.
Do you feel any pressure?
No. Leif pulls his hand away and falls silent, not saying a word. Is that everything?
Yes.
How is it? Leif takes a moment to respond before weakly coughing into his arm.
It may take a bit more time to heal than we originally thought.
No growth formula?
No, that would not be advised. It's best to let it happen naturally. I've been in contact with the royal smith to have a temporary prosthetic made. Your new crown will also be finished soon. As you requested, it will resemble the crown of your great-grandfather.
All right. Yes, very good. Adrius slides out of the bed once more, standing up and walking over to the wardrobe in the corner. He pulls out the lowest drawer and lifts a pair of black trousers from it. So, where's Liz? I'd like to know if there is anything on the agenda today that I don't know about.
Fortunately, I can tell you that personally. About an hour after noon, there are several citizens who have made appointments to speak with you on your counselor about certain matters.
Adrius pulls the trousers up around his waist and buttons the top, then reaches for a lilac shirt folded neatly in the middle compartment.
Other than that, it is a mostly uneventful day. However, I'm not just here to check on your injuries.
Oh?
Liz was the one who sent me. She wishes to speak with you.
She can come and see me whenever she likes. Adrius finishes putting on the first layer of clothing, then begins buttoning his vest.
She was actually very insistent that you meet with her in the court chambers.
Adrius freezes while buttoning the last button on his vest.
Very well.
Has Bjorn recovered yet?
No, I'm afraid he hasn't.
Be sure to let me know as soon as he wakes.
Of course.
A few moments pass as Adrius progresses through the rest of the process of dressing himself.
Are you well?
Never better. Why?
You seem a bit stressed.
Adrius turns around, looking down at the bird. I'm only tired, that's all.
Are you absolutely sure?
Of course. Leif rocks back and forth on his feet before prying again.
I'm not just talking about your physical health. I wanted to know how you were doing after everything that's happened. Things haven't begun to slow down until recently, and ever since all this chaos started, you seem...
I'm fine, Leif. You can stop interrogating me now. Adrius makes his way to the door. I'll go see what Liz wants.
Do you really plan on killing Lyall?
Adrius whirls around, his cape twisting with his body. If it comes down to it, it's not something that you should be worried about. If the Heart's cavalry captures Lyall alive, he'll get a fair trial.
Like the trial Richter was given?
Adrius advances on Leif, looking down at him with cold, dark eyes. Leif, if I wanted your opinions on the current events, I would have appointed you as my advisor, not my physician. Leif takes a step back, but then speaks, his voice quiet.
I know more about what's going on than you understand. I've been by your side constantly throughout this entire tragedy.
Adrius disregards him, turning around to leave, but Leif continues.
And it wasn't you who appointed me as a royal physician. It was your father. Need I remind you why?
The deer stops at the door and stands there for a moment. After a few seconds pass, he sighs and turns around.
I am not in the need of a reminder. I truly do value you and your wisdom, Leif. Just don't get under my fur about this situation again.
Leif tilts his head to the side in a ponderous manner, as if showing agreement.
Very well. Now, let's go see what Liz wants. Is she doing better?
Adrius opens the door and holds it for the small bird as he tentatively walks through.
Thank you. And no, not really.
Leif scuttles ahead of Adrius to the chamber door and pulls it open, holding it for him. Adrius strides through, and as he enters, his eyes adjust to the dim, candlelit room. Candles are lit throughout the room, and letters and books clutter the table. On the other side of the room, at the end of the table, Liz stands over an old, large book, among several other pieces of parchment and scrolls. She looks tired, her hair tied back messily and her eyes bloodshot. She is also visibly drunk. In front of her on the table sits a chalice full of wine, along with a couple of empty bottles. She stands up from her chair, a scowl upon her face as Adrius enters the room.
Dear God, have you even slept?
Leif quietly follows behind him, closing the door and standing by it.
Letters. Letters.
She picks up a scroll and throws it across the table. Adrius leans over and catches it before it lands on the table.
From who? Dries.
Adrius' fingers tense around the paper as he unrolls it carefully. Holding it up to a candle, he reads it himself. My son and I offer you our sincerest condolences for the murder of your father. King Raynar will hold a special place in all of our hearts. We pray for the prosperity of your kingdom and wish you good health. Aaron Starfall.
I can already see you're mad. Reasonably so. King Aaron only wants to touch on the subject of a death in the family as a form of risk management.
Adrius crumbles up the letter and throws it to the side.
That's important, Adrius. Relax. It's not even his handwriting. I've helped Father answer and send letters for the last 3 years. After the accident, his hands were never quite recovered.
Liz slumps back into her chair, pinching the bridge of her nose. Leif goes over to her side, placing her wing on her hand.
Anything else of importance?
Liz sits up in her chair slightly, reaching for her letter on the table.
You know me, I saved the best for last. A letter from the judge of Holmes End.
She clears her throat and reads out what's written down on the piece of parchment.
We have had numerous attacks from the northern side of the canyons. Several villages and settlements south of Holmes End have been bombarded with raids. Halfton is a ruin. I urge you to make contact with the King of Dries in order to formulate a solution.
She rolls up the letter and tosses it back onto the table, taking a sip from her chalice. Adrius leans on the table, anger burning deep inside of him. With each word she spoke, his anger festered.
Call upon the royal army. Have them march to the canyons and kill every single bandit, criminal, and barbarian. Adrius. Come Winter's End, I want that entire nest wiped out. Man, woman, and child, I won't rest until that stain is wiped from the map. We can't do that. Without Dries' cooperation, we can't march on their lands. Your father knew this, and I'm completely certain that you know it. I don't care if you don't agree with it. You know that this is the right choice.
Leif picks up the letter and reads it over, clearly nervous about what's happening.
Crossing their border will do more damage than what's already been done. No, they have lost complete control over that part of their territory. No matter how many troops they send in to clear out that main road, the heart of the problem will always continue to grow. They focus so much on their manpower towards building and cultivating the sides of their kingdom. They let others drown in the problems that they breed while continuing to rise above those beneath them. Dries uses faith as a tool of deception and a beacon for those around them, yet they're fully content with letting everyone be consumed by the blood-stained sands. Listen to me. She slapped her hands on the table in exasperation. It won't work out the way that you want it to. Leif clears his throat. She's right, Your Majesty. Going about these problems in a careful manner is the best solution. We cannot afford to cause one predicament while trying to solve another. Liz sighs and looks back up at Adrius from across the table. This is the first time that Adrius has seen her lose her temper in a while. Adrius, you have to stop making these rash decisions. I feel as if I'm the only one who's making any decisions. Dries would let evil gestate within that very bloodstained sands of their kingdom, rather than commit to anything. For once, please trust that I have this kingdom's best interest at heart. I admire your resolve, but we need time to figure things out. Fine. Adrius shouts this at her, and she jumps slightly, Leif more so. He sits down in his chair behind him and steadies his breathing. A headache begins to develop, but he rubs the sides of his head with his fingers, keeping it at bay for the time being. How soon can we send soldiers to take control of the area? I want the villages closest to the canyons to be well guarded in case of any further attacks. It would take days to even deliver the order to our garrison south of Flint Haven. Not only that, but from there, the journey south would take a week at least, given the supplies needed to set up camp. Have them garrison in the towns then. I don't care how it's done, just make sure Holmes End has decent protection against these southern invaders. I'll have the order drawn up immediately. Liz rises from her chair with the help of Leif and leaves for the door. Leif, be a dear and have a cartographer brought to my room. Certainly. Adrius holds up his hand and she stops before rounding the table. I did not dismiss you. She rests her hands on the table, glowering at him. Let it be known that I've always had the kingdom's best interest at heart. I'm sure you do. But did it ever occur to you that you don't know everything? Elizabeth! No, Leif. Let her continue. In the privacy of these chambers, I won't shrink from criticism. As a figurehead, I can't be questioned, but as a king... Adrius sits up in his chair, resting his hand underneath his chin. Go on, Liz. I want you to be honest with me. Your Majesty, she's intoxicated. She doesn't mean... I'm fine, Leif. She mutters this in his direction while gritting her teeth, and he steps back. We've received no word from Aaron on the subject of Lord Richter. None. If we had kept him as a hostage, then we might have been on better track towards clarity. But here we stand. No Aaron, Lord. No answers. She takes in a deep breath and exhales, a hysterical expression appearing on her face. Not only have we lost Lord Richter, but Lyall has run off with him, only God knows where. Lyall Reed. I understand your constant ill treatment of him would lead you to forget this, but he is the only son of Lord Marcus Reed. They're a small house now, but still one of the oldest and most powerful, aside from your own. And I've just had to send his Lord Father a letter telling him that his son has committed murder, treason, and has run away with the man known for killing the king. And this is somehow my fault? In small part, yes. Sending Richter to his death like that was never going to work out. It was a dramatic display at best, and now we have to deal with it. I needed to use him as an example. Letting him escape was never my intention. All traditions be damned, his execution was a game for you. Toying with a man's life like that. I voted him innocent for a reason. And why did you vote him innocent? What? I've been wondering for days.
Adrius leans back in his chair, a scowl growing on his face. Liz gives him no answer, and he sighs.
I'll ask again some other time. Is that everything? For now. I will think about what you said. However, I know your mission in Dryas was somewhat successful, but it's clear that our situation with Dryas has become far worse. I will be taking action if things proceed down this path.
Silence falls over the room aside from the sound of Leif nervously shuffling in the corner of the room.
Go on and rest, Liz. We'll speak more on this later.
Liz takes a book off of the table, along with a few scrolls, and briskly walks to the door. She rests her free hand on the door handle and turns to Adrius.
Adrius. What? I'm on your side, whether you want to believe it or not. And I truly do care for you.
He shuffles in his seat and turns, looking at her.
I know. That's what I like about you. Your unwavering allegiance. Rest well.
She opens the door and steps through the doorway, the sound of her shoes tapping against the floor as she walks off. The door closes by itself with a soft thud, echoing throughout the room.
Leif? Yes, Your Majesty?
Adrius rubs the spot where his antler should be.
I feel a headache coming on.
Cancel the appointments I have later.
Of course, Your Majesty. Would you like some medicine for the pain?
Very much, yes. Adrius rises from his seat and picks up the crumpled letter from Dryas. After standing, the pain becomes more apparent. He slowly makes his way to the door, which Leif graciously opens for him. Once he steps through the doorway, an odd feeling washes over him. It's a feeling similar to how he would feel after waking up from drinking too much the night before. Waking up to an unfamiliar surrounding. Or somewhere that you shouldn't be. Where did... He turns to Leif, who has a puzzled gaze behind his mask. I'll be in my room, if needed. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. There's a whole lot more to see. Anyway, so... First and foremost, thank you all for the channel members who were waiting for this. I made you guys wait like an extra day, but thankfully, it's here. For all the other public people, you guys get to see it whenever it is that I am able to release it. Hopefully that should be soon, because I want you guys to see it too. But yeah. So... we delved into something that I wasn't expecting. Well, first and foremost, we got to see what happened to Lyall, you know, before he rescued Ritcher. We got to see how he did it too, because that was something that was sort of like up in the air, like how did he, you know, come out of nowhere? And it was interesting to see that the headsman was the one that basically, I guess, helped him in a way. I mean, he didn't report him or anything, because obviously he was able to go out there and help Ritcher. We don't know why yet, unfortunately. I mean, you guys will find out eventually why he did it. And I'm actually surprised that Lyall reacted the way he did in killing the Lynx guard. But I guess it's either a thing of, oh, he had to kill a co-worker, I guess, in a way. You know, he's a murderer now. He didn't think that he would be doing this. But, oh, well, I guess he did. Now, the surprising part. Adrius, his childhood and how it led up to where we are now. We got to see that I guess he could be considered a stillbirth, or not a stillbirth. He was breached, so it's a breached birth, which I think means that... Actually, no, let me Google it real quick. Actually, let's ask Alexa. Not Alexa, Siri. Hey Siri, what does a breached birth mean? Well, that's very useful. You were supposed to tell me. A breech presentation occurs when the fetus's buttocks, feet, or both are in place to come out first during birth. So that means that the baby is usually supposed to come out head first, which is sometimes why babies have like a little bit of a cone shape. Um, and when they're breached, that means that their head is in there longer, which is bad. Um, so in Adrius's case, that's why he was deprived of oxygen. I actually thought that was when the cord gets like wrapped around their neck, but that's something completely different. So thankfully, I guess in a way, Leif was able to resuscitate little baby Adrius. But unfortunately, well, not even unfortunately, because it's not even his fault that he grew up with such anger. Well, not even he grew up, he had a very nice childhood. He had parents who loved him, and even Lyall, as like the little, not little, he was like the older brother. But after his mother died, that's when things changed. He became a whole nother different person. You could say that, something snapped in him. A whole nother different Adrius just came about. I am laughing for a very specific reason. But yeah. So it was good to see that sort of progression from little baby Adrius to the monster that he's become. So yeah. What else? I mean, like I said, there is more to come. There is more to this update. It's very long. I can't actually see how long it ended up being, but it was like a little bit under 3 hours. So yeah. Well, anyways, so as you guys could see earlier, I put up the channel members. Now they kind of scroll up, which is cool. I figured out how to do that thanks to Stream Elements. But yeah. What else? I don't know, like comments, the comments section, like, thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play Lyre yourself and find out what happens, because, for the public people, they won't be seeing the next part for like another 2 days. So if you want to see that, or actually, yeah, like in 2 days, then, you can go and play it and see what's to come, the juicy bits, the part with Ritcher and Lyall. But for all the channel members, or more specifically for the Yin Friend channel members, you guys get to see, the next part soon, like immediately right after this video, if you want to, or if you have time. It's just up there for you guys. But yeah, so also, all the pertinent links will be linked down in the description, obviously. Before I forget, Atmac's Twitter page, his Patreon will be linked down too. Also, the merch, and at the time of recording this, actually, even before the time of recording this, when I originally recorded Lyre, there is now a Lyall plush. So if you want your own little goofy little knight, then you can get your own little Lyall plush from Paw Print Press. Woo! But yeah, so I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.